Whether it's hanging half 100 on them at Owen Field or the run rules on the diamond at Love's Field, we're giving you the breakdowns, the bets, and the hot takes from the perspective of two former OU Athletics employees. You're listening to the Mainline Podcast with Tyler Burton and Adam Jacquez.
Let's go! Let's go! Go!
All right, welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Mainline Podcast on this beautiful, windy Tuesday, March 12th. I'm your host, Tyler Burton, flying solo on tonight's episode. My co-host, Adam Jacquez, is out for the week for a pretty special occasion. We'll cut in some slack. Congratulations to Adam and his wife, Johanna, on the birth of their first child. You'd love to see it, but I told Adam today the show must go on, and we've got a lot to talk about tonight. Oklahoma had their pro day a little bit earlier this morning. We'll talk about the big takeaways from the workouts inside the Everest Center. Spring football Team 130 edition got rolling yesterday. We've got we've got a brand new roster with some new players, new measurements, early rumblings already on a couple of guys that we really didn't expect to be running with the ones on the first day of practice. So we'll dive into that here in a little bit. And as always, we keep you updated with what's going on both on the diamond and on the hard court. But before we start talking football, this episode of the Mainline is brought to you by our friends over at 29th Street Tag Agency. I've always hated going to the DMV, and you probably have too. Long lines, slow service, not enough workers. Someone's always running late. It's one of the worst ways to spend your day, but thankfully, we've got a solution for you here. We've got a fix for our listeners out there. 29th Street Tag Agency is not your average DMV. They've got great, unique customer service, short lines, and an online portal that makes it super, super easy to book appointments. So whenever you need new tags, titles, driver's license, head on over to 29th Street Tag Agency. Plus, to make it even better, they've also got an insurance agency right next door. So it's really a one-stop shop for all of your automotive needs. Check them out at the link in the episode description. All right, back to the episode. Okay, like we started off on this episode, Oklahoma conducted their pro day a little bit earlier this morning. All 32 NFL teams were present to check out a handful of Sooners conducting some pretty impressive workouts over the course of this morning, led by Jerry Schmidt. And as we kind of look into this, we're not going to dive into every single one of the players, the workouts that they turned in. Tyler Guyton, Walter Rouse turned in a fantastic performance. But for me, the three biggest takeaways that I had coming out of the results, seeing some of the numbers that these guys put up, obviously, Isaiah Coe, we ultimately did not get an invite to the NFL Combine. This was going to be his opportunity to really showcase his ability as an athlete, in the running, in the strength and conditioning, in the defensive tackle drills as well. And Isaiah Coe, biggest takeaway that I took from this guy, 34 reps on the bench press, one of the best if Isaiah Coe would have been invited to the NFL Combine. When you look at guys that are going to be part of this draft class, that are going to be defensive linemen at the next level, that 34 reps that Isaiah Coe turned in was at the very, very top of that list. So huge shout out to IC. Jonah Laulu, have yourself a day, young man. This guy woke up this morning, knew that he needed to turn in a really impressive workout to, kind of get his name out there a little bit more, maybe impress a few people that he wasn't necessarily on their radar. And then you look at some of the measurables that this guy turned in: a 9-foot 10-inch broad jump and a 36-inch vertical for a defensive lineman to jump 36 inches up in the air. Pretty damn impressive for Jonah Laulu. So the kid made him some money today. And then number 3, this was a guy that many, many people out there, a lot of Oklahoma fans, this was the guy because he was snubbed, didn't get the invite to the NFL Combine, even though he was the leading receiver in the Big 12 a year ago in both yards, catches, and touchdowns. Drake Stoops had an opportunity to go out there in front of all 32 NFL teams and really turn in a pretty impressive workout. 4.67 in the 40. We kind of thought he was going to be in that mid 4.5, low 4.6 range. So the 4.67 40 is a really nice time there for Drake, but he really impressed the scouts that were on site during the route running portion of today's workout. And for anybody that's had an opportunity to watch Drake over the last couple of years, he's not going to kill you with breakaway speed. He's not going to burn you with straight line speed, but his ability as a route runner, I can't tell you, maybe one or two defensive backs all season long really had the ability to kind of buckle down and cover this guy, one-on-one. He's that good of a route runner. Drake Stoops did what he had to do in Norman this morning in front of the NFL scouts. And, I think that what this is going to be a huge thing for Oklahoma going forward. Gabe and Teddy talked about it in the Oklahoma breakdown a little bit earlier this week, that magic number that Oklahoma's got such an impressive streak going on right now with the NFL draft, and that's that they've had 4 or more draft picks, dating back for, well into double-digit years now. So what's that magic number going to be for Oklahoma players drafted this cycle? I definitely think that Ko and Laulu's stock rose today, and the workout that Drake Stoops turned in, combined with his tape and his high football IQ, he's going to get an opportunity to go somewhere, and whatever team takes a chance on Drake is going to get a really, really good football player. And now, like I said, as we transition into spring football, Team 130 edition, they got out onto the practice field. Practice number 1 kicked off earlier yesterday. Obviously, it was good to see the guys out there flying around. Media didn't have an opportunity to go out there and partake in that. That's obviously going to come a little bit later as these guys kind of ease into, spring camp a little bit more. But there were some storylines, things that we can talk about, because Oklahoma put out a brand new roster yesterday morning with updated height, weight, sizes. So it was good to kind of go back to last year's roster, compare and contrast, see where guys have made some gains in the weight room, both in the weight. A couple of guys actually put on some added height as well. Seeing where these guys have been able to transform their bodies over the last 3.5 months has been a lot of fun to see. Kip Lewis was another guy who, as we saw, had a really, really strong back half of the season a year ago. He's up 8 pounds to 214. And this is a guy who was a heat-seeking missile playing last year at about kind of that 200 to 205 range. So him being an inside linebacker, ideally you would want to see him get up to maybe about 220 by kickoff. But the fact that he's been able to put on 8 pounds of solid muscle over the last 8 to 12 weeks and still keeping that speed at that size and stature, watch out for Kip Lewis going into this upcoming fall. Danny Stutzman up another 5 pounds to 241. R. Mason Thomas, this is a big one as well, because like we've talked about, over the course of the offseason so far, the edge position for Oklahoma defensively, this is going to be a strength of this football team. And when you look at what R. Mason Thomas, who was kind of battling a little bit of the injury bug a year ago, when he's fully healthy, coaches all across the defensive staff have said that he is the most unblockable guy at the edge position. So the fact that he's been able to put on 7 more pounds, you would expect that he's going to be around that 250 mark once kickoff gets here in just a few more months. Huge shout out to RMT for the work being put in the weight room. A couple guys over on the offensive side of the football, particularly on the line of scrimmage, I think this is a really good sign for Oklahoma as they try to, kind of hash out what that offensive line rotation is going to be. Who's going to be those 6, 7, 8 guys that are going to, emerge? Who's going to rise to the top and be part of that rotation for Bill Beanball? Logan Howland up 22 pounds over a year ago, up to 306. That's huge for Logan going forward as he tries to get his way into that rotation to see some playing time here at Oklahoma in 2024. And then the biggest one of all in terms of offensive linemen, the center position has been up for grabs. Andrew Raym, he's off to the NFL. So now you've got a position battle going on right now between Troy Everett and Josh Bates. Troy Everett up 11 pounds. He surpasses the 300 mark. He's weighing in at 305 pounds as of March 5th. So, huge shout out to Jerry Smith, the strength and conditioning staff, the dietitian, the nutrition staff going on in Oklahoma right now. It's pretty clear that a lot of these guys, have taken this offseason seriously, and we look to, kind of see, the effort that they put in. Now we can kind of see that, come to fruition and see how it, makes them better as football players on the field. And then you just kind of go down and you look at the rest of it. Another thing that kind of popped out to me when you look at this roster, tight end has been something that we've harped on this podcast over the last couple of seasons, because outside of, Braden Willis, once Braden Willis graduated and, found himself as part of the San Francisco 49ers, the tight end position has been an absolute liability at Oklahoma. And I'm not saying that Austin Stogner was a bad football player. Austin, fantastic job. You had, you made your fair share of plays, have had your moments in Oklahoma uniform. But going forward, going into the SEC, the tight end position is simply one of the 11 spots on offense that Oklahoma just simply has to be better at. You've got to be able to block better. You've got to have a guy that can be a difference maker in the passing game. And I think that the fact that when you look at these guys, they have 3 new tight ends in Jake Roberts, Bauer, Mitchell, all of these guys 6'4", 250 pounds plus. So huge shout out to Joe John Finley for transforming this tight end room over the last couple of seasons, because not only has the talent been an upgrade, but you've also seen the size and the length and the girth of these guys in that position room. It's gotten a hell of a lot better. So if there's one thing that I do kind of take away from looking at this, you look at the measurables, that does, give me a little bit of cause for concern. And again, as we're sitting here right now, it's March 12th. We still have about 5.5 more months to go before we actually kick this thing off. So again, we're not going to dive into it too much, but if you are trying to look at the negative part about this, looking at the measurables, the defensive tackle, still small on the interior position. I know that we lost Jacob Lacey, a guy that was 300-pound plus, veteran guys, played a pretty good amount of football. Losing him, obviously retiring due to medical reasons, that's a huge blow to Oklahoma offensively. And I know we lost a ton of production from a year ago when we've got some young guys inside, but I really hope some of these measurables are off, because these defensive line weights are really concerning for a group going into the SEC conference. Dejon Terry is the only defensive lineman listed at over 300 pounds, coming in at 321. You look at the rest of the guys on this list, just kind of going down here. Ashton Sanders, 284. Grayson Halton, 284. David Stone, 283. Jane Jackson, 295. We're going to give the pups a pass. They're true freshmen. They've only been on a college campus for a couple of months now. Jane Jackson's going to surpass the 300-pound mark by the time kickoff gets here, and you would anticipate that David Stone is going to approach that as well. But Devon Sears, who's been part of this program for well over a year now, he's only 289. Marcus Strong, 282. This is just kind of a situation where I would venture to guess that the average weight for starting offensive linemen in the SEC next year is going to be in that 320-pound, plus range. So if you're Oklahoma, you've got to be asking yourself defensively on the line of scrimmage, where's the beef? By everything that we know from what they've got on the roster, from what's, coming in through the transfer portal, from what's came in the recruiting class, Oklahoma is going to be very well positioned. They're going to be very talented, very well seasoned at the edge position. But you talk about the guys on the interior, where's the beef? And I think that one of the scariest parts about the makeup of this roster right now is your two biggest question marks are both on the lines of scrimmage. And that's not where you want to be going into the SEC. I'm sorry. You can hide a lot of things offensively and defensively when you're getting dominant play from your offense and defensive lines. But when you're having to rely on, whether it's a wide receiver or a corner or safety to be a guy that's constantly having to bail you out because your line of scrimmage play is so poor, then, it's not going to bode well for you in terms of wins and losses for the season coming up. So, that's just kind of some takeaways that we had over here at the main line from the roster that got put out yesterday. We actually posed a question now that the guys are back out there on the practice field. We took to Twitter asking, who is the biggest mystery player this spring going into camp? Had a couple really good responses here. CNC Machine said the entire offensive line. Yes, 1,000% agree. You look at what they lost a year ago, the amount of production that they're having to replace. They're essentially replacing all 5 starting offensive linemen for a year ago. You know what you've got coming back in Jacob Sexton. Troy Everett is going to be a player. Spencer Brown, the transfer coming in from North Texas. A lot, Garen Hatchett from Washington, Michael Tarin from USC. There's just a lot of young new faces, and from some of the reports that we've been getting from the first couple of days of camp, there's a couple of guys that we might not necessarily thought were going to be part of the fold less than a week into spring practice, but it's been obvious that a guy like Keith Ozada or a guy like Logan Howland, they've kind of come in, they've used this offseason, they used all of their experience a year ago, being redshirted. It's clear as night and day that they've had an opportunity to take full advantage of their time with Jerry Schmidt, with their coaching, getting more comfortable in their position, in their role in this offense. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch this offensive line group kind of take shape over the course of the next few weeks of spring practice. Larry Sackett on Twitter says the secondary as a whole, great in takeaways, but absolutely porous in yards allowed. Larry, I would absolutely agree with you on this. I think that, going into the SEC this upcoming year, when you look at the quarterback play, that Oklahoma's going to be going up against, whether it's Quinn Ewers, Jackson Dart, Nico out there at Tennessee, Garrett Nussmeier at LSU. There's going to be, more than a handful of guys where if you're not on your P's and Q's, if you're not, fundamentally sound, communication's good, there's quarterbacks with athletes at the skill positions to really make you pay if your secondary is not playing extremely well. And this kind of goes back to what I was talking about with the defensive line. Everybody that back seven, linebacker all the way back to corner and safety, your best friend as a defender is a dominant, effective, disruptive defensive line. So again, this is going to be an opportunity where this secondary, I think, has an opportunity to be probably the deepest unit on the entire football team, maybe outside the wide receiver position. So I'm not entirely worried about the secondary. But I totally get where you're coming from, Larry, and we'll see how this thing plays out as these guys continue to grow and get better as we get an inch a little bit closer and closer to the season. A lot of Javonte Barnes replies. This is the last one that we have here, a guy that, his freshman season in Oklahoma, we saw some flashes, especially that Cheez-It Bowl, where him and Gavin Sawchuk, kind of that 1-2 dynamic duo, had a fantastic performance against Florida State. Battled the injury bug a year ago, had that offseason foot surgery, never quite felt like he fully healed up and was back to 100% from that. And, the playing time, the carries, the number of reps kind of suffered because of that. So what are you going to get from a guy like Javonte Barnes going into year 3 in this system, being coached by DeMarco Murray? From everything that we've heard, he's as healthy as he's been since he's gotten to campus to wear an Oklahoma uniform. But this, no doubt about it, this is a big spring, not just for the entire running back room as a whole, but especially for Javonte Barnes, because all the talent, all the tools are there. It's just up to Javonte to kind of put everything together and get himself prepped to have a big 2024 season. Moving on. We're getting away from the gridiron. We're going to the hard court now. Basketball roundup, kind of recapping what's going on with Oklahoma men's and women's basketball. Starting with Jenny Baranchek's group, Sooners fall to Iowa State in the Big 12 tournament semifinals yesterday, 85-68. Just not Oklahoma's day, plain and simple. The Cyclones were super efficient shooting the basketball, and unfortunately, the Sooners had no answers for the Cyclones in the paint. While they came up a game short of the conference tournament finals, the season is far from over. They finished the regular season at 22-9, back-to-back Big 12 conference champions, and now they get an opportunity to kind of rest up and kind of, regroup as they await the selection committee to announce the field for this year's March Madness tournament. But again, another great year for Jenny Baranchek's squad. Let's see if they can go ahead and make another deep run into the postseason, see if they can't make a Sweet 16 once postseason play kind of kicks off. On the flip side, I know a lot of talk with this men's basketball team with Porter Moser. There's been so much conversation online, on social media, about Porter Moser's future, with the Oklahoma basketball program. DePaul's been a name that's been thrown out there. The connections back home, to the state of Illinois. Is Porter Moser going to be the head coach at the University of Oklahoma going forward? And it's kind of been a lot of fun, banter back and forth between this one particular Twitter account, the coaching carousels, and a lot of these other both national, college basketball reporters. I know some of the local guys here in Norman have gotten in on the action as well. But Porter Moser did come out just a couple of days ago and said that he wasn't going anywhere. Oklahoma was where he wanted to be. He wants to continue to grow and build this basketball program. But unfortunately, another thing that we heard from Porter Moser a little bit earlier today, during his media availability, he let loose that the Sooners will be without Rivaldo Soares and John Hughley against TCU tomorrow for the first game in the Big 12 Conference Tournament. Now, this is a huge loss. Obviously, Rivaldo Soares has probably been the best player on Oklahoma's roster for the last month and a half, and not having the ability to have John Hughley come back to be another guy that both has the opportunity to make shots out on the perimeter, but he's a big, gruesome guy that has the opportunity to kind of dirty things up in the paint and, be a strong force inside, especially rebounding the basketball. But Oklahoma tips off against the Horned Frog. It is slated for 2:00 tomorrow. That's going to be Wednesday at 2:00 for those listening to this a little bit later. They did lose to TCU earlier this year in their only matchup against the Horned Frogs. It was in Fort Worth. They fell 80-71. We'll see what Oklahoma can do. We think they're in the NCAA tournament. We think they're going to be making their first appearance in March Madness in the Porter Mosier era. Now that they've hit that 20-win mark, that's why that was such a pivotal win for them to come back and beat Cincinnati, but also have that win on the road in Gallagher-Iba Arena against the Pokes up there in Stillwater. So, again, we'll see if this men's basketball squad, without Rivaldo, without John, if they can't knock off TCU and, find a way to win one more game. If they win tomorrow, 100% they're in the NCAA tournament going forward. But, again, you have to feel pretty good about Oklahoma's resume even without a win tomorrow. All right, last but not least, let's talk some Diamond sports. Starting with Marita Hines, starting out at Love's Field with Patty Gasso and the three-time defending national champions, Oklahoma softball. They got back on track last week, going 4-0, including a 3-game sweep in the Big 12 opening series against Iowa State, outscoring the Cyclones 29-3, and the star of the weekend, hands down, was first baseman Sydney Standers. She was named the Big 12 Player of the Week and the NFCA National Player of the Week. She actually reached base in 10 of her 12 appearances over those 4 games, smashing 5 extra base hits, 5 walks, going, batting 5 for 7. And, oh, by the way, she hit 4 home runs over the course of the weekend as well. So anytime you have a performance like that, those accolades are warranted and well-deserved. Nicole May moved to 7-0 after another impressive performance. Kelly Maxwell keeps her perfect, streak alive, going to 6-0. And I think another thing that Oklahoma softball fans out there really need to kind of pay attention to, we know about Maxwell, we know about May, but Kirsten Deal continues to look better and more confident the more experience that she gets in the circle. And I thought that collectively this was the best hitting weekend for Oklahoma's lineup so far this season, like I alluded to, outscoring Iowa State 29-3 over 3 games. So they're currently in the currently in progress right now. They're in the second game of a doubleheader tonight. They had an earlier game today against Tarleton State where they won 8-0 in 5 innings. Another run rule victory for Patty Gasso's squad. Kelly Maxwell actually threw her first no-hitter of the year, throwing complete game, no hitter, 7 strikeouts. And as we sit here right now, I believe they're up 7 or 8 runs about halfway through this game as well. So again, currently in the middle of a midweek doubleheader against Tarleton State before they travel on the road to Lubbock this weekend against Texas Tech. And we've talked about, over the course of the first month of this season, it kind of feels like something was missing. Something was just a little bit off. Patty's been tinkering with this lineup. You haven't seen that same level of hitting production from these girls from top to bottom, even though they're all hitting, 350 plus. But when you look at the standard that Oklahoma holds themselves to and the performance that they've put out game in and game out over the last few years, something's been just a little bit off, but it was nice to see them put up 29 runs over the course of last weekend. Kind of feels like they're starting to click, starting to fire on all cylinders again. Baseball, and Adam, for you listening to this, I know that Adam's optimism did make its return to the podcast last week, but I guess they must have been listening to you, Adam, because they swept UCF over the weekend, and the Oklahoma Bats finally woke up Saturday and Sunday, putting up a total of 25 runs over the course of the weekend. They're currently in a midweek battle right now against Oklahoma State in Norman at L. Dale Mitchell Park. Cowboys put up 6 runs in the first inning. Oklahoma's currently down 8-2 in the third. As we record this, we'll see if Skip Johnson's crew can't get this thing back on track. We'll see if we can't, pull out a big come from behind win over the Pokes. And then, it doesn't get any easier. They travel down to Arlington tomorrow to take on UT Arlington in another midweek matchup before they stay down there in Dallas. They venture their way. The focus shifts to Fort Worth, where the Sooners are set to face a really good TCU baseball team that is sitting right now at 14 wins, 2 losses on the year. So, Oklahoma's got some positive momentum right now coming off of the sweep over UCF, having a nice victory last week against Wright State. But even though you've got that positive momentum right now, and by the time that we record next week's episode, we're going to know a lot more about Skip Johnson's baseball team, and we'll see if they can't go down to Fort Worth and take 2 out of 3 from the Frogs. So last question here, or last segment here, before we kind of put a bow on this. Obviously, flying solo on tonight's episode. Hopefully, Adam will be back in the next couple of weeks. Mailbag, a couple of listeners' questions that have been submitted to us through social media and also through email as well. First question here. If you could guarantee 1 win on Oklahoma's schedule next season, who would it be? And this is a really good question, Alex. Obviously, Texas is one that comes to mind. It's your arch rival. It's the game that Oklahoma fans look forward to. They circle it on their calendar each and every year once that schedule comes out, just for bragging rights, recruiting battles, all sorts of things like that. You want to knock off Texas each and every year. But I'm going to go in a different direction on this one. I'm actually going to go to the very last game of the season. Since the year 2000, the LSU Tigers are 141-23 in Baton Rouge at Tiger Stadium, including a perfect 7-0 at home a year ago. So if I could pick one game that Oklahoma goes into next season guaranteeing that they're going to win, where I think that this would be, not just huge for, the landscape of college football, but this is huge for Brent Venables and this Oklahoma program, as they continue to progress and get better. If you could tell me that Oklahoma's going to go into Baton Rouge and what's probably going to be a night game next year in Death Valley, yeah, give me a win over the Tigers, every single time. That's going to be my pick here. Question number 2. If you could make a change to the athletic facilities, this is from Paul. If you could make a change to the athletic facilities on campus, what would it be? And I think that once Adam gets back and we're back to a full squad on this podcast, we'll definitely revisit this, because for me, there's two renovations that I would make tomorrow. If I had the funds, if I had the power, if I had the capability, these would be the 2 things that I would fix. Number 1, I would bulldoze the LNC. We'll just go ahead and get that out of the way right now. Number 2, with Oklahoma making the transition into the SEC, and I know that the bank accounts are about to get a lot bigger. There's about to be a lot more dollar signs, a few more zeros within this athletic program's budget and the amount of money that they're going to be raking in because they're joining the SEC, and with the new key TV contract and all the different things that are going to be coming because of this move that Oklahoma chose to make a few years ago. The west side of the football stadium, both the press box and the premium seating. I've been up there for all of, any fans that have had an opportunity to go up there into the press box, for all of our media members out there. Seems like it's kind of it's an annual tradition where it's always a conversation topic about how bad Oklahoma's press box is compared to the other teams that they play on their schedule. And make no mistake about it, it's awful. It is one of the worst press boxes that I've ever had an opportunity to go into. I've been in, a few that I've had an opportunity to go into. I've been into TCU's. I've been into Texas A&M's. Had an opportunity to go into SMU's. Is another one as well. Oklahoma is seriously lacking from a media hospitality standpoint, if that's the way that you want to rephrase it. So you've got to renovate the press box. You've got to get it fully upgraded to what what it should be for a program like Oklahoma and in the SEC. The second thing that I alluded to was the premium seating. Now, obviously, you've got some club seating up there towards the top near the press box, but the huge, the premier seating, quote unquote, in that stadium has always been the Santee Lounge. It goes all the way from Section 3 all the way across the west sideline to Section 8. My family's got season tickets in there. We worked in ticketing over the course of 3 years. Both Adam and I did. We sold season tickets, sold packages in that Santee Lounge. And I'm just going to sit here and say it. I know that I've got, Oklahoma, administration, a few, employees that actually still sell tickets or are a part of this. You got to do something about the Santee Lounge. I've had an opportunity to go into some of the other programs within the SEC, check out some of their premium seating, some of their suites, loge boxes, club seating, things like that. Texas A&M is probably the best example to give right now because it's probably the newest, most latestly renovated facility in the SEC right now that Oklahoma is going to be playing against. It's top notch. Make no mistake about it. It's first class. It's luxurious. It's premium. The food is phenomenal. The alcohol, the total atmosphere is 1,000 times better than what Oklahoma is kind of projecting right now, what they're putting on the table over on the west side in the Santee Lounge. The food's bad. It's outdated. It's old. It's nasty. And obviously money talks. You got to have the opportunity and the time to be able to upgrade things. And again, it is coming. We've seen the architectural designs, 6 or 7 years ago. And so I'm sure that it has been updated, at this point. But make no mistake about it, the renovations are coming both to the west sideline, hopefully to the premium seating, and as well for the press box. So again, those are my 2: bulldoze the LNC and then renovate the west side of the football stadium. Last question here: do you ever miss your days working in the ticket office? I'm going to save that for when Adam comes back as well. Do I miss it? I miss the people. Do not miss the day-to-day operations, but we can touch on that a little bit more once we're back at full strength. But again, that's going to do it for us here at the Mainline Podcast. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Give us a 5-star review on whatever platform you're consuming your podcast. We are a Red Dirt Media show, and you can find our content on Twitter at the Mainline Pod. You can follow Adam at Adam Jacquez, myself at Tyler Burton 7. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we will see you right back here next week for another episode of the Mainline Podcast.